There's a moment, right before someone cuts you out of their life, where everything still looks normal. The room is full of music. Laughter rings out. Glasses clink together in toast after toast. People hug you, smile at you, say you look wonderful. But somewhere beneath it all, something shifts. And if you're quiet enough, still enough, you feel it. Like a draft from a window you didn't know was open. That was the night of my granddaughter's engagement party. The hall was beautiful, soft string lights, fresh peonies, little candle jars lining each table. I'd spent 2 days helping decorate. I baked 3 pies, ironed the white tablecloths Rachel had said were too wrinkly for photos, and lent them $5,000 from my savings to cover the last-minute venue change when the original space flooded. They didn't ask, I just gave it, because that's what you do when you're family. At least that's what I thought. My name is Estelle Harper. Most people call me Essie. I'm 76 years old. I've lived in the same house for 42 years, raised 1 son, buried 1 husband, and baked more casseroles than I can count. I don't ask for much. A seat at the table, a hug now and then, maybe a thank you when I spend half a week braiding garlands or polishing silver. But that night, something shifted. It started with the seating chart. I walked into the hall and looked for my name, expecting to find it near the front, maybe next to my son, Andrew, or my granddaughter Hannah. Instead, I found my name all the way near the back, scribbled on a small white card at table 9, between Rachel's cousin and groom's coworker. I didn't say anything. I just smiled at the usher, adjusted my cardigan, and found my seat. I told myself it didn't matter, that it was a mistake, that someone must have thought I'd want a quieter table. But when I looked toward the head table, long, grand, overflowing with champagne flutes and matching gold napkins, I saw Andrew sitting next to his wife, Rachel, laughing. Their daughter Hannah stood in the center giving hugs to people. As they arrived, I waited for her to come to me. She didn't. The dinner moved slowly, courses I couldn't pronounce, tiny rolls, passed down the table like they were made of gold. Everyone talked around me, polite smiles, short answers. One man asked me if I was with the caterers. I said nothing. I just took a bite of my soup and stared at the spoon for a long time. Then came the toasts. Rachel's father stood first. He told a long sentimental story about Hannah learning to ride a bike, how he let go and she soared. Andrew went next. He talked about how proud he was, how Hannah had grown into a woman of grace and strength. He said, "She got that from her mother," and gestured toward Rachel with a smile. Everyone clapped. I kept my hands in my lap. No one looked at me. Then near the end, Hannah stood with her glass and said, "Does anyone else want to say something?" There was a pause. I lifted my hand gently. Hannah smiled. "Grandma, of course." I stood. My knees ached, but I smiled through it. I held my glass up and said, "I just want to say how proud I am of you, Hannah. Watching you grow has been..." And then Rachel cut in, her voice too cheerful. "Maybe keep it short, Essie," she said, laughing lightly. "It's their moment." The room chuckled. Even Hannah laughed, like it was nothing, like it wasn't a slap in front of 50 people. I froze. The words caught in my throat. I nodded gently, smiled, that polite, paper-thin smile you wear when your chest is cracking open, and sat down. I didn't finish my toast. I didn't finish my meal either. An hour later, I slipped out the side door without saying goodbye. No one stopped me. No one noticed. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I turned the engine on. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I kept hearing Rachel's voice over and over. "You're not really family anymore." She hadn't said it directly, but that's what it meant. That I was an extra, a placeholder, useful only when needed, forgotten when not. When I got home, I made tea. The kitchen was quiet. The air still smelled faintly of lavender from the candle I burned that morning. I sat at the table in the same chair I've used for decades, wrapped my hands around the mug, and stared at the wall. And that's when I made the decision. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I pulled open the drawer under the phone, the one where I kept important papers, old utility bills, and my last updated will. I laid it on the table and began to read. My handwriting in the margins, Mark's old notes, faded now. At the time I'd left everything to Andrew and Hannah, a house, some savings, a small insurance policy. It wasn't much, but it was meant to be something to remember me by, a way of saying, you mattered. I wanted to help. Even after I'm gone. I stared at the line that said, to my beloved son and granddaughter, I leave all that I have, equally divided. I picked up a pen, crossed the line out, not in anger, in truth, because when someone tells you you're not family, believe them. People think erasure happens all at once. A fight, a betrayal, a slammed door. But I've learned it usually happens the way paint peels. A slow fade, a flake here, a chip there, until one day you look up and realize you're standing in a house that no longer remembers you were part of its foundation. That's what it felt like with Andrew. He used to call me every Sunday, every week without fail. He'd tell me about work, about Hannah, about the new restaurant he and Rachel had tried. Then it became every other Sunday, then once a month, then only when he needed something. The last time he called to ask how I was just because he missed me. I honestly can't remember, but I remember everything else. I remember the night his father died, how Andrew, only 11, crawled into my bed and whispered, "Who's going to take care of us now?" I told him, I will, and I did, every single day for the next 6,500 of them. I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, school librarian by day, grocery store clerk by night. I'd come home, feet blistered, legs sore, and still help him with his homework, before washing dishes and packing his lunch for the next day. I sewed patches on his jeans, scraped ice off the car windshield at 6 a.m., and made pancakes in funny shapes just to make him laugh. He didn't have grandparents, both sides gone before he was old enough to remember. No aunts, no uncles, just me. I filled every role. I was the audience at his science fair, the coach at his soccer game, the cheering section at every graduation. When he got into college, I sold Mark's old coin collection to help cover tuition. He never asked. He didn't have to. When he and Rachel got married, I gave them the down payment for their first house, quietly, without ceremony, because that's what love looks like in the real world. Not gifts wrapped in bows, but sacrifices folded into silence. And I never wanted anything in return. Not a penny, not a parade, just to be seen, to be remembered. To be invited, not tolerated. But somewhere along the way, I became furniture, present but unused, sat on only when necessary. I started noticing it the year Hannah turned 15. She used to come to my house every Saturday. We'd bake scones, water the garden, play board games. She'd sit cross-legged on my couch and tell me about school drama, what songs she liked, what teachers she hated. But then one weekend she canceled, then again the next. Then Rachel texted me, not even Andrew, and said she's just too busy now. Teens, you know how it is. I told myself it was normal. Growing up means drifting. I didn't take it personally, but it didn't stop with Hannah. Rachel began sending holiday invitations last minute, sometimes the night before, like I was an afterthought. One year, I offered to host Thanksgiving. Rachel said, "Oh, I didn't realize you were still up for that kind of thing." I was 69, not 99. They stopped asking me to babysit, then stopped telling me about vacations. I found out they'd gone to Hawaii from a photo Hannah posted online, all 3 of them on a beach, grinning. When I asked about it later, Andrew said, "Oh, it was last minute. We didn't think you'd want to come." They didn't think I'd want to come. That was the first flake of paint. The next came when Rachel started calling me Essie around her friends instead of Mom. At first I brushed it off, but then I overheard her once, on the phone with someone saying, "She's Andrew's mother. You know, just part of the extended family." Extended family, the woman who raised your husband, who sat at your bedside when Hannah was born, because you were terrified and your own mother wasn't around, who cleaned your fridge, when you were too exhausted to notice it. Smelled like old milk and takeout. I stopped offering to help after that. I still showed up. I still brought casseroles to birthdays, cards to holidays, but something in me started to close off. I began doing what they had done to me, quietly editing myself out of the picture. Still, part of me hoped there'd be a moment where Andrew pulled me aside and said, "I see what's happening. I'm sorry. I miss you." But that moment never came, and I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. They were never going to say it, because they didn't think they'd done anything wrong. They thought this was the natural way of things, that mothers become shadows, that grandmothers become furniture, that once you're no longer useful, you quietly fade out of the frame. But not me, not this time. I looked at the will again. It had been years since I'd updated it. The old copy still included everything: the house, the savings account, my pension. Mark and I had saved carefully. We didn't live fancy, but we lived smart, and we left something behind, something that now felt like a reward they assumed they were entitled to. I called the lawyer the next morning. Her name was Denise. She had sharp glasses and a sharper memory. She'd handled the estate after Mark passed, and had once told me, "Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is plan ahead, before they think to plan around you." I told her I needed to make changes. She asked if I wanted to remove my son entirely. I paused. "No," I said, "but I want him to understand that love is not inheritance, and that if he couldn't remember I was family while I was alive, then maybe I don't want him remembered in my legacy." She nodded. "I've got just the form for that." We spent 2 hours revising the will. We added conditions, clarified language, moved funds into a private trust. I redirected half the assets toward a scholarship fund for local girls in science, something I'd always wanted to do as a librarian, but never thought I could afford. We redirected the rest toward someone else, someone I hadn't seen in years, but had never forgotten: my late sister's daughter Kelsey. She was the one who used to visit me every summer, helped me paint the porch when she was 6, still sent birthday cards with long handwritten notes about her new job, her rescue dog, the little garden she was starting. She never asked for a thing, but always remembered my name. So I wrote it down right there in a line that said, "To Kelsey Ann, for the life she built on her own, may this help her grow something even stronger." And then I signed it, not in anger, not in grief, but in resolve, because I had finally learned the truth. If someone tells you in words or in actions that you're not really family anymore, you don't owe them the version of you that still believed you were. You don't notice the exact moment someone pulls away from you. It's not like a slam or a snap. It's quieter, like a tide. One moment the water's brushing your toes, and the next you're standing in cold sand, wondering where it all went. That's what it was like with Hannah. She was my granddaughter, my shadow one, a little girl who used to twirl through my living room in a mismatched princess dress and whisper, "Grandma, you're my best friend." We used to have sleepovers every month. She'd bring her favorite stuffed turtle, and I'd let her eat ice cream straight from the carton, something her mother never allowed. We'd watch old cartoons, paint our nails with polish that smelled like bubblegum, and fall asleep to the sound of rain tapping the window. I taught her how to make pancakes, showed her how to plant tulips. We once spent an entire afternoon baking lemon cookies, just because she liked the way the dough felt in her hands. She was bright, kind, curious, and for a long time, I believed that no matter what happened between me and Andrew, at least I still had her. But kids grow up, they grow and they adapt, and they start echoing what they hear the most, even when those echoes sound nothing like love. The first time I noticed it was subtle. It was her 16th birthday. Rachel threw a big backyard party, tents, fairy lights, catered food. I showed up with a hand-sewn quilt I'd been working on for months. Every square was embroidered with something personal: her birth date, her favorite quote, a stitched drawing of her stuffed turtle, even a recipe card in fabric for those cookies we used to make. When I handed it to her, she smiled, polite, distant. "Thanks, Grandma. That's..." Then she set it aside and opened a box with a designer logo on it. Shoes, white sneakers, brand new, trendy. She gasped, shouted, "Oh my God, Mom, you remembered." Everyone clapped. Someone took a picture. The quilt stayed on the grass, half covered by wrapping paper. Rachel later posted a photo on social media, a carousel of moments from the party. In the caption, she wrote, "Our girl is growing up, so lucky to be surrounded by friends and family who love her." And there I was, not in the photos, not mentioned in the tag, just a blurry figure in the background, bent over a folding chair, holding a paper plate of half-eaten cake. I told myself it didn't matter, that teenagers are self-involved, that Rachel probably just forgot, but forgetting isn't harmless when it happens over and over again. When Christmas came, I wasn't invited to the family photo shoot. When Hannah made honor roll, I found out from a neighbor, whose son saw it on the school website. When Rachel had surgery last spring, I offered to help. They said they had it covered. And Andrew, he said nothing. Sometimes I'd call, leave a voicemail, just to say hello, just to remind them I was still here. Days would go by, then Rachel would text back something short like "busy week, hope you're well." That became the norm, that polite distance, like I was a package delivered to the wrong house, and they were trying to figure out how to return me without looking rude. But the worst of it came one afternoon, not long after I'd changed my will. I had decided on a whim to stop by. I'd just baked cinnamon rolls, the kind Hannah used to beg for, and figured maybe I'd catch them at home. They lived 20 minutes away, but it felt like another country. I parked at the curb, box of warm rolls wrapped in a dish towel, and rang the doorbell. Nothing. I waited, then knocked gently. After a moment, the door cracked open. Hannah stood there, dressed in sweatpants, phone in hand. "Oh. Hey," she said flatly. I smiled, held out the box. "I was just in the neighborhood, thought I'd bring some cinnamon rolls." She didn't take the box. She glanced over her shoulder, then looked back at me. "Mom says we're kind of trying to do boundaries right now." I blinked. "Boundaries?" She nodded. "Just, like not unannounced visits, you know? It stresses her out." I stared at her. This was the same girl who once called me at midnight, sobbing over a school dance, who crawled into my lap when she broke her arm, who used to sneak into my bed because she hated the sound of thunder. "I see," I said softly. She looked uncomfortable, like she knew it was wrong but didn't have the vocabulary to say so. "I'll tell Mom you stopped by," she added quickly, and then she closed the door. I stood there for a while, holding the cinnamon rolls, like they might break. Then I walked back to my car, placed them on the passenger seat, and drove home. No one called, no one texted, the rolls went uneaten. That night, I sat on the couch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, and stared at the dark window. It wasn't sadness that hit me, it was something deep, a kind of hollow that echoes. I wasn't just being pushed out, I was being rewritten, and I couldn't help but wonder, how long had they been waiting for me to disappear? How long had they hoped I would quietly step aside, so they could live their shiny curated lives, without the weight of obligation? I poured a cup of tea that I didn't finish. Later I pulled out the folder from Denise, my lawyer, looked at the trust papers again. Everything was final. No loopholes, no access unless I allowed it. I'd done the hard part, but it still didn't feel finished, because I hadn't said what I needed to say. They'd made it clear I wasn't family anymore, but they hadn't heard it from me yet. And part of me, a part that had spent decades holding back, wanted them to know that I saw them, that I had paid attention, that I wasn't confused or helpless, that I was choosing distance now, not being left behind. So I began writing a letter, not bitter, not accusatory, just honest, the kind of letter a woman writes when she's finally done waiting to be seen. There's a moment in every woman's life, when she stops asking to be heard. It doesn't come in a roar, it doesn't come with fireworks or fists. No. It arrives, like a whisper settling into your bones, the kind of stillness that says, "You've said enough, now let them sit with the silence." The night I wrote the letter, I didn't cry, I didn't reread it 5 times, I didn't even fold it carefully. I just wrote, every word steady, every sentence clean. It wasn't long, maybe 2 pages, but it said everything that needed to be said. I started with the truth. I have always loved this family. I have loved it even when it made no room for me, even when my name was left off invitations and group photos. I showed up, I gave what I had, not because I was asked, but because I believed love was enough. Then I told them what changed. Over time I've felt myself becoming background, a footnote, something that can be overlooked, replaced, or simply erased. And lately your words and choices have made it clear.
You don't see me as family anymore. I paused then, stared at that sentence for a while, because it wasn't said in bitterness, it wasn't a plea, it was just fact. I continued, I want you to know I heard you, and I accept it. I am no longer trying to fit where I am not welcome. You said I wasn't really family, so I've updated my plans accordingly. I wish you peace, and I hope one day, when your reflection stares back with time behind it, you remember who stood beside you quietly, even when it hurt. That was all. No threats, no final warnings, just a mere. And I left the rest unsaid, because sometimes, what people imagine is louder than anything you could write. The next morning I printed the letter, slipped it into a plain envelope, and mailed it. Not a dramatic delivery, not even just a quiet arrival, like the kind they'd grown used to from me. 3 days passed, then came the call. Mom? It was Andrew's voice, tight, controlled, not worried, just prepared, like someone walking into a room where they know the light bulbs are out. I got your letter. I said nothing. I don't know what to say. You really think we don't love you? I waited a beat before answering. I think you love me when it's convenient. He sighed. That kind of long, slow exhale men use when they've been rehearsing a response, and it's already unraveling. I'm sorry if we made you feel that way. If, not because, not for, just if. I smiled a little to myself. You didn't make me feel anything, Andrew. I just finally believed what was already happening. He was silent, then almost defensively he said, You're taking things too far. It was one comment at Hannah's party. Rachel didn't mean anything by it. She said I wasn't really family. She was stressed. And when Hannah closed the door on me, was she stressed too? He paused. She's a kid. She's 18. Still silence. I could hear him shifting, probably pacing in whatever room he was in. I think we're all just trying to do what's best for everyone, he said carefully. No, Andrew. You're doing what's easiest for you. That landed, because I didn't raise him with vague platitudes and soft shoulders. I raised him with books and late-night homework sessions, with check-ins and casserole, with 12 years of solo parenting, 2 jobs, and one rusted-out car that somehow got him to every football practice. And now here he was, trying to reason with me like I hadn't seen this coming for years, like I hadn't watched myself being phased out one birthday, one holiday, one awkward family dinner at a time. He cleared his throat. So what? You're cutting us out? I didn't flinch. No, I'm stepping out. There's a difference. You can't just. He stopped himself, then tried a different tone. I mean, don't you think you're overreacting? I almost laughed. That word overreacting has been weaponized against women since time began. I let it hang there in the space between us. Then I answered in the softest, sharpest voice I could manage. No, Andrew, I think for once I'm reacting just enough. And then I hung up. The voicemail came later that evening. Rachel's voice, not frantic but performative. Hi Estelle, I just wanted to reach out. We're all a little surprised by your letter. It's been a tough few weeks and I think things got misinterpreted. I know things were said that might have hurt, but I hope we can all move forward. I really don't think it's healthy to dwell on the past. We love you and we're family. At the end of the day, that should matter more than any paperwork. And there it was, the part they never said out loud until now. They didn't mind fading me out of dinners or decisions or milestones, but the second it touched their inheritance, suddenly we're family again. Funny how that worked. I didn't call her back. I didn't text, didn't email. I poured myself a glass of orange juice, ate 2 crackers with cheese, then opened my bedroom window and let the breeze roll through. I slept well that night. 2 days later Hannah showed up. No call, no warning, just a knock at my door. I opened it slowly. There she stood, arms crossed, posture defensive, eyes flickering between guilt and confusion. Hey, I nodded. Hey, she hesitated. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She walked in, like she didn't know whether to sit or stand, so she hovered in the living room near the bookshelf. I don't get it, she finally said. What don't you get? All this, the letter, the will. Everyone's talking about it like it's this bomb you dropped. I sat down in the armchair by the window. I didn't drop a bomb, Hannah. I left the room. But we're family. I tilted my head. Are we? She blinked. I mean, yeah, obviously. Do you remember what you said when I brought cinnamon roll?
She froze. You said your mom was trying to have boundaries. That unannounced visit stressed her out. Her voice lowered. That wasn't. I didn't mean to be mean. I know. Then why are you acting like we don't care? I stared at her. really looked at her. The teenage armor. The phone tucked into her palm like a shield. The discomfort sitting just under the surface. Because you've been taught to care conditionally, I said. She looked confused. You've been taught that family is about appearances. About photos and captions and credit. Not about presence. Not about respect. I didn't mean. I know you didn't. But you meant what you said that day. And you didn't think about it again afterward. That's the part that hurts. She looked away. I sighed. I'm not angry at you, Hannah. I'm just tired, and I've decided that I don't want to spend the last chapter of my life trying to convince people of my worth. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she whispered, "Does that mean you're not coming to the wedding?" I raised my eyebrows. "Would you want me there?" She didn't answer, and that was answer enough. That night I made tea. I pulled out Mark's old watch, the one that stopped ticking years ago, but still caught the light just right. I sat on the couch, the dog-eared letter tucked beside me, and felt something new. Not regret, not sadness, just relief. Because when someone tells you they don't see you as family, the kindest thing you can do for them and for yourself is to believe them. And then, you build your life accordingly. Quietly, unapologetically, and without looking back. There's a strange calm that comes after a long decision has finally settled in your bones. Not adrenaline, not spite, but clarity. That week the sky stayed overcast, thick with the kind of gray that usually makes you feel stuck. But I didn't feel stuck. I felt steady. The kind of steady that comes from standing still long enough to feel your own weight again. Tuesday morning, I put on the burgundy coat I hadn't worn in years. It still fit, a little snug at the shoulders, but it made me feel held. I wrapped a scarf around my neck, grabbed the thin manila envelope from the kitchen drawer, and slid it into my handbag like it was nothing more than a grocery list. Then I drove downtown. The law office sat just above the bakery that still smelled like cinnamon and butter every time you passed it. The bell above the bakery door chimed as I walked by, and I smiled, just for a moment. The world still moved sweetly, even if people didn't. Upstairs the carpet was thin, and the lights flickered a little in the waiting room. But the woman behind the desk smiled with a warmth that felt real. "You must be Estelle Hartman." I nodded. "That's me. Attorney Green is ready for you." Right through that door, I stepped in. Elaine Green was younger than I'd expected. Mid-40s, maybe. Hair in a bun, blazer neat, hands folded across a slim folder. She stood when I entered and offered a firm handshake. "Mrs. Hartman, it's a pleasure." "Please," I said. "Just Estelle." She smiled. "All right, Estelle. I've reviewed the email you sent, and the old documents, and I have to say you're handling this with remarkable thoughtfulness." I eased into the leather chair across from her. "I've had a lot of time to think." "I can tell," she said. "Would you like tea or water before we begin?" I shook my head. "I'd just like to get it done." She nodded, then opened the folder and began walking me through the new documents page by page. I was clear in my instructions. My estate, modest as it was, would go into a trust. The home would be maintained until I passed, then sold. The proceeds would be donated, but not to my family. Instead, I named a cause that mattered to me: the local public library fund, and the women's shelter on 8th Avenue. The same one where I once donated a box of winter coats after Mark passed. Elaine glanced up as she read that line. "Are you sure?" she asked gently. I met her eyes. "I'm more sure of this than anything I've done in the last 10 years. "All right," she said. "Let's finalize it." The pen felt heavier than usual when I signed. Not physically, spiritually. Every loop of my name was a thread being tied up. Every line I initialed was a stitch in a wound I no longer planned to reopen. When I reached the end, I leaned back and exhaled. For the first time in a long while, I felt full of my own breath. Elaine gathered the paperwork and began sorting the copy. "You know," she said softly. You're not the first woman I've seen walk in here after a lifetime of giving, only to find she was never written into the parts that mattered. I'm sure, I said, but it's rare to see someone do what you're doing now without anger. I gave her a small smile. I'm not angry, I'm just, finally choosing myself. On the way home, I stopped at the library. Not for the books, but for the feeling. The rows of shelves felt like old friends. I wandered for a while, fingers brushing spines, stopping now and then to read a title I'd already read years ago. Then, as I passed the children's section, I saw a small girl seated cross-legged on the carpet, flipping through a picture book. She looked up and smiled at me, toothless and wide-eyed. Her mother stood a few feet away, gathering a few chapter books, clearly stretched thin but still patient. And in that moment, I remembered what it was like to raise a child with nothing but instinct and exhaustion, and how badly I'd wanted someone, anyone, to make it easier. I stepped over and tapped the mother gently on the shoulder. Excuse me, I said. You don't know me, but would you accept a small favor? She looked wary, as any mother would. I don't want anything from you, but I just signed a will today, and I realized I have a little more to give, just not to the people I used to think would receive it. She blinked, surprised. I pulled a $100 bill from my wallet, one I had stashed for emergencies, and folded it discreetly into her palm. Buy her books, I said, or shoes, or whatever you think she needs. Her eyes filled. Ma'am, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, I said, just pay it forward someday, when you can. I turned and left before she could hand it back. Outside, the wind picked up and tugged at my coat, but I didn't shiver. I walked to my car with purpose. That evening Andrew called again. This time I let it ring. I didn't need to hear the bargaining, didn't need another attempt at rebranding neglect as logistics or gaslighting as miscommunication. Instead, I played my old vinyls, the ones Mark used to hum along to while washing dishes, and I made myself a good dinner. Not just toast or soup. I made real food, chicken with rosemary, fresh carrots, even a slice of pie I'd picked up at the bakery on the way home, and I ate every bite at the kitchen table, with the good napkin, because I deserved that. The next week, the letter arrived. I knew it was from Rachel before I even saw the return address. The envelope was thick, formal. Inside was a typed letter and a handwritten note. The typed one was all professionalism. It begged for reconsideration, said the family was shocked by my choices, that legacy should be a conversation, not a conclusion. But the handwritten one was worse. It simply said, if you're doing this out of pride, I hope you remember who took care of you when Mark died. That one made me sit down, not from sadness, but from disgust, because what they'd never understood was this: I wasn't removing them out of pride, I was releasing myself from being a placeholder. There's a difference. Later that week I called Elaine again. There's one more thing I'd like to add, I told her. Of course, she said. What is it? I told her about my neighbor Anita, the retired school teacher, who checked on me every week, who once brought over soup when I had the flu, even though she was sick herself, who never asked for anything but always offered everything. I'd like to leave something for her, I said. Elaine smiled. I'll add a personal gift clause. She'd never expect it, but I want her to know I saw her. I remembered, because that's the thing about real family. It isn't always sometimes it's the people who show up in quiet ways, who offer you soup without paperwork, who shovel your driveway without posting about it online. Sometimes they are the only ones who deserve your name in anything that lasts. The package came 2 days later. Not a letter, not a voicemail. A thick white envelope hand-delivered to my door. Inside, a copy of Andrew's counter proposal, nicely bound, professionally printed. He had hired a lawyer. He hadn't spoken to me in person in weeks, but suddenly, he had enough energy to put together a whole legal rebuttal to my will. It was laughable, in a dark, bitter sort of way. A clause-by-clause analysis, pages arguing that the trust I'd created could unintentionally complicate matters for surviving family members. And then the kicker, a personal note stapled to the front, not handwritten, typed in that same sanitized language they'd all adopted lately. We love you, Mom.
we're just trying to make sure things are fair. Let's be reasonable. We can correct this together as a family. As a family, the same family that forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. The same family that used my home like a hotel, but never brought their own sheets. The same family that decided I was just background the moment I wasn't funding their comfort. No, they didn't want fairness. They wanted access. I didn't respond right away. I didn't scream. I didn't send anything back. I just poured a cup of tea, sat in my sunroom, and let the silence do its job. That evening, I went for a walk. There's a peace that comes when you know the worst thing they can do is already done. They already removed me from the table, already demoted me from mom to nuisance, already decided I was just the babysitter. What else could they take from me? So I walked past the rows of sleeping houses, past the cracked sidewalk near the pharmacy, past the old playground where I once pushed Andrew on the swing, until my arms ached. He was 5 then, smiling, always saying, "Just one more time, mama." And I always said yes, always one more time, always giving. Not anymore. The next day, Rachel showed up, unannounced, at my door like nothing had happened. She was dressed in her usual tidy black slacks, and that fake smile cardigan she wore when she wanted to look friendly but in charge. "Mom," she said, "can we talk?" I stared at her through the screen door. She smiled too wide. "I just think there's been some confusion." I opened the door slowly and let her in. But this time, I didn't offer tea, didn't offer the couch. I just stood, arms crossed, as she stepped inside. She wasted no time. "Andrew said you've been making changes," she said, like I was sneaking around rewriting the Constitution. I had. She blinked, "Without consulting anyone." "It's my will, Rachel, not a group project," she sighed. "It just feels sudden, out of nowhere. You've always talked about wanting to support the family, about leaving something behind. I am leaving something behind, just not to people who treated me like a burden." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "That's not fair." "Oh," I said, my voice level. "You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about the Christmas you told Clara to just open Nana's gift later, because it was too basic for her taste." She winced. "I didn't mean..." Or the time I was told not to bring banana bread to Thanksgiving because Lauren had more sophisticated plans. Or the birthday dinner where you sat me at the end of the table alone, and never once asked how I was doing after the fall I had that month. She swallowed. "Mom." "No," I said, "you don't get to mom me now. You've made it clear, I'm not really family anymore. Remember?" She sat down then, slowly, as if her knees had given out under the weight of finally being confronted. "You're twisting things." "No," I said, "I'm remembering them." She looked down at her lap, then quietly, "Andrew didn't mean it when he said that, but he said, and neither of you corrected him." There was a silence then, not awkward, just honest. She finally looked up. "We didn't think you'd take it so seriously." I blinked, then I laughed, not meanly, just sadly. "You thought I'd keep giving even after you stopped pretending to care." Rachel didn't reply, so I kept going. "You all assumed I'd still write the checks, still send birthday cards with crisp bills, still let you use the summer cabin, still babysit, still show up for your lives, even when you stopped showing up for mine." She shook her head. "It's not that simple." "But it is," I said. "You all counted on my silence, on my softness, on my willingness to stay in the corner and be grateful for scraps. But I'm not doing that anymore." She stood abruptly. "You're throwing away your family." I stood too. "No," I said, "you threw me away a long time ago. I'm just finally walking away from the garbage." Later that evening, I received a text from Andrew. "You had no right to humiliate Rachel like that." I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned off the phone and left it in a drawer, because this wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, and for once, finally, I had nothing to explain. The next week, I had dinner with Anita. She made pasta. We drank wine. We watched a rerun of Wheel of Fortune, and made fun of the contestants' bad guess. We laughed so hard I nearly cried. At the end of the night she hugged me tight. "You've been lighter lately," she said. "Not sad, just freer." I smiled. "I am." Then I handed her a small card. "What's this?" "A note," I said, "just in case anything ever happens to me." She opened it, read the short paragraph, then looked up at me, teary. "Estelle, you don't have to say anything," I told her. "You've already said enough, every time you knocked on my door without being asked, every time you showed up. 2 days later my doorbell rang again, but this time, it wasn't family. It was a young woman, early 20s, nervous smile, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hi," she said. "My name's Lila. I'm a caseworker with the Women's Support Center." "Yes, I just wanted to say thank you. We received notice of a very generous future contribution, and we don't normally do house visits, but I just wanted you to know it'll make a difference." I stood there stunned. No one had ever thanked me for money before. "Not really, not like that." She extended a hand. "You don't know me, but what you're doing, it matters." And right then, something in my chest finally loosened. Not because I felt powerful, because I felt useful, and not in the way my family had used me, but in the way I had chosen to be used. The invitation came on a Tuesday, a group text, family meeting, Sunday, 5 p.m. at Andrew's house. Everyone needs to be there. No please, no explanation, just a demand sent like a summons, not a request. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to ignore it, but then I decided to go. Not for them, for me, not because I owed them anything, because I wanted to look each of them in the eye one last time, to be heard, not just present, not just there. The drive to Andrew's house felt familiar in all the wrong ways. I'd driven that road 100 times. Birthday parties, babysitting favors, Sunday dinners I cooked but never got thanked for. But this time, I didn't bring brownies, I didn't bring a smile. I brought a folder, my documents, my decisions, my voice, in black and white. The house was too clean, that kind of brittle surface, perfect clean, that doesn't feel lived in, only staged. Rachel opened the door. "Glad you could make it," she said, her tone clipped. I stepped inside. No hug, no warm greeting, just the cold air of an ambush wearing the perfume of civility. They were all there. Andrew, of course, sitting at the head of the dining table like a judge waiting to call court to order. Lauren, arms crossed, sitting stiffly at his side. Rachel pacing near the fireplace. Even Clara, my granddaughter, who barely looked up from her phone. So this was the tribunal. No one offered me tea. No one asked how I was. Andrew launched in immediately. "Mom," he began, his voice heavy with forced calm. "We're concerned." I raised an eyebrow. "About the choices you've been making lately." Rachel jumped in. "They don't seem rational." "Rational," I repeated, tasting the word like something spoiled. Andrew pushed forward. "It's not just the will, it's the donations, the trust, cutting us out of everything without warning. You're acting like we're strangers." I smiled. "Well, that's how you've been treating me for years." Lauren scoffed. "This isn't about feelings, it's about what's fair." "Fair," I said slowly. "Yes, let's talk about fair." I opened the folder, pulled out the printed family group chat from last year, the one where I offered to host Thanksgiving, and no one replied. Then the birthday card I sent Clara returned unopened. The email I sent Rachel when I fell and needed help getting groceries marked as read, but never answered. And finally the photo I had printed out, me at the last family dinner, sitting alone at the end of the table, plate cold, no one talking to me. I slid them across the table. "No one wants to talk about that kind of fairness," I said softly. Andrew frowned. "That's not what this is about." "Oh, I think it is," I replied. "You want me to keep pretending everything is fine, keep being the good little grandma, who cooks and pays and disappears. But the moment I assert a boundary, I'm irrational." Rachel stepped forward. "You're twisting things, Mom." "No," I said with more steel than I expected. "I'm untwisting them, for the first time in years." Lauren leaned in, voice tight. "Do you know what people will say when they find out you left your entire estate to strangers?" I stared at her. "Do you think I care more about appearances than about peace?" That silenced the room. Andrew tried again. "Look, we're just trying to look out for you. By demanding I reverse my will, it's for your own protection. You've always said family takes care of each other." I nodded slowly. "I did say that, and for decades I lived by it. Took care of your kids, took care of the house, took care of you. But you stopped living by it a long time ago. You started taking, and expecting, and quietly rewriting the rules." He flinched. I leaned forward. "Family isn't a title, Andrew. It's a practice, and none of you have practiced it in years." Silence. Clara finally spoke, her voice low. "Grandma, Are you really cutting us off? It was the first time she'd looked me in the eye all night. I softened, not because I doubted myself, but because I remembered what it was like to be young and confused, sitting between the fire and the fuel. I'm not cutting anyone off, I said. I'm stepping back and choosing peace. But nothing, I said gently. I love you, I always will, but I won't keep funding disrespect. That's not love, that's enablement. Rachel's voice cracked. You raised us to be strong. I did, I replied, but I didn't raise you to be cold. That part, you chose. Andrew sat back, exhaling sharply. So this is final then? Yes, I said. Lauren hissed. You'll die alone, you know. I smiled. I already did. And with that, I stood up, folder still in hand. I walked toward the door. Not one of them followed. Back at home, the evening was still. I made myself a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, turned on the small radio and listened to soft jazz. No one called, no one messaged. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting. Not for their love, not for their approval, not for the crumbs of connection they used to throw like scraps. I wasn't exiled, I had chosen this. And there is a peace that only comes when you realize walking away isn't losing. Sometimes it's finally being found. The first snow came quietly that year. It didn't fall in flurries or stick to windshields like before. It drifted down like a whisper, soft, light, indifferent. The world outside my window turned white, in slow motion, as if asking permission before covering everything in silence. I didn't check my phone that morning. I didn't wait for another apology. There wouldn't be one, not the kind that mattered. Instead, I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, poured a warm cup of Earl Grey, and sat by the window with a pen in hand, and no plans for the rest of the day. I'd earned this kind of quiet, not the lonely kind, the chosen kind. The envelope was still on the mantel, the one Andrew left behind the night of the meeting. I hadn't opened it, not out of anger, out of understanding. I already knew what was inside, a letter, maybe a last-ditch maybe a guilt-soaked apology, laced with condition and subtle manipulation. Maybe just an empty attempt at doing the right thing now that it was too late. But it didn't matter. Whatever it said, I'd already answered, by walking away, by rewriting my way, by saving myself from being rewritten. And later that week, I got a knock at the door. It was Helen, from the library gardening club. She had a plastic tub of homemade chili in her hands, and a smile too wide to ignore. I made extra, she said, and you looked like someone who could use a warm bowl and a warmer voice. I invited her in, not out of politeness, but gratitude. We sat at the kitchen table like two women who'd known each other for longer than just one winter. She didn't ask about my son. She didn't ask about the will. She didn't need to. Some people can read silence like a second language. Over the next few weeks, I found myself moving into a rhythm I hadn't known I missed. Morning walks, library afternoons spent planting small winter greens in the community bed. Not because they'd bloom, but because something deserved to be tended. I brought muffins to the quilting circle once. No one judged that they were store-bought. We weren't performing for each other anymore, just exist kindly. It wasn't the family I thought I'd grow old with, but it was a family, in its own way, built on presence, not pressure, on choice, not duty. One afternoon, while reorganizing my bookshelf, I found an old photograph wedged between cookbooks. Andrew, maybe 10 years old, sitting on my lap, arms wrapped around my neck like he never wanted to let go. His smile was wide, mine even wider. I didn't cry, I didn't ache, I just stared at it, not as a mother mourning a son, but as a woman remembering that love once lived here, and that was enough. I gently placed it in a box, with other keepsakes, not hidden, not discarded, just shelved. Sometimes love has chapters. Not all of them are meant to last till the end. Clara messaged me once, just one line. I miss you. No emojis, no requests, no demand. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Then I closed the phone and set it aside. Not because I didn't miss her too, but because I'd learned, you don't return to fire just because it once kept you warm. You don't open the door just because someone knows. They need to mean it, and that takes more than words. Around mid-January, I was asked to speak at the library's senior storytelling night. A small group, maybe 15 people, folding chairs and thermoses, and cookies that crumbled on contact. Nothing grand. I thought about saying no, but then I remembered how many times I had been silenced, how often my voice had been edited out of my own story, so I said yes. When I stood at the podium, I didn't read from a book, I didn't share a fairy tale, I told my story, exactly as it happened, not loud, not bitter, just true. When I finished, the room stayed quiet for a long time, then someone clapped, then someone else, and then the whole room, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Afterward, a woman maybe 10 years younger than me approached, with tears in her eyes. She said thank you. I didn't know I was allowed to walk away from the people who made me feel invisible. I took her hand gently and said, "You're not only allowed, you're expected to, if you want to survive." She laughed a little, then cried more. Sometimes survival looks like setting down the story someone else wrote for you, and picking up the pen yourself. Spring came sooner than expected. The tulips outside bloomed without asking anyone's permission. The air smelled less like loss, and more like lemons and old. I hosted tea in my backyard one Sunday, just a few women from the library. We didn't dress up, no one brought gifts, just stories, laughter and a few cracked mugs, filled with warmth. Someone asked if I ever regretted changing my will. I didn't pause, I didn't hesitate. No, not once, because it wasn't about revenge, it was about respect, and sometimes, the only person who needs to show you that, is you. The day I turned 77, I lit a candle on a cupcake, and made a wish, not for them to come back, not for reconciliation. I wished for nothing more than to keep choosing myself, again and again, even when the world told me not to. I blew out the flame, and the room didn't feel empty, it felt like I had built a home inside myself, one that didn't need doors left open for anyone who refused to knock with kindness. If you've ever been made to feel like you didn't belong, if you've been told through silence, or sarcasm, or slights, that you weren't really family anymore, let me tell you something that took me 77 years to understand. You do not need to be invited to your own life. You do not need to explain your boundaries. You are not cruel for refusing to shrink. Sometimes, the best legacy you can leave is peace, and sometimes, the truest love you'll ever feel is the kind you finally give to yourself.